The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Thank you. Warned you about this. Second term, baby. I know Republicans are still sorting out what happened in 2012, but one thing they all agree on is they need to do a better job reaching out to minorities. Call me self-centered, but I can think of one minority they could start with. Hello?
Blue Monday, I hate Blue Monday. Got to work like a slave all day.
It is the Savage Nation. There he is, the clown-in-chief, still playing the affirmative action game. Not good enough that he's president, you see. Look how far he's gotten race baiting. Why should he stop now? Why should he stop now? I don't know if any of you had the time or the inclination to tune in over the weekend to the so-called correspondence dinner, the so-called White House correspondence dinner, which has degenerated into a full-scale reality television show on the order of the real presidents of Washington, D.C., because he could be one of many candidates for the presidency. He would fail if this was a television show and they were trying him out. They'd say, nah, you know what, he's still playing that affirmative action game. That's not going to work. Nah, his ears are too big. But wait, it gets worse. It gets much worse. Now, there are no longer White House correspondents per se. There are White House stenographers. So what you're listening to is the White House Stenographers Dinner, produced in its entirety by Katzenberg, Matzenberg, and Spielberg, probably with a little advice from Harvey Weinstein. Listen to the next soundbite from the White House Stenographers Dinner.
Everybody loves Michelle. She's on the cover of Vogue, high poll numbers, but don't worry, I recently got my own magazine cover. Now, I get it. These days I look in the mirror and I have to admit, I'm not the strapping young Muslim socialist that I used to be.
See, he's playing to his own crowd. That's okay. They're all far-left radicals. That's okay. We understand that that's what the correspondents have become. They're nothing but stenographers for Pravda or Izvestia. We understand that. But I want you to listen. I'm deconstructing this for you, how clever Axelrod is. I mean, Axelrod, who is Obama's brain, it used to be said that Rove was Bush's brain, so it's fair. Turnabout is fair play. We can say with a certain high degree of certainty that Axelrod is Obama's brain. Axelrod is a genius. First of all, he got a totally incompetent socialist into the White House. That's number one. But number two, he's kept him in the White House. And now number three, he's decided that the way you stay in the White House is to triangulate your enemies by giving them exactly what they think you are and turn it into a joke. Are you listening? Listen to the next one, clip 3. Clip 3.
Library, and some have suggested that we put it in my birthplace, but I'd rather keep it in the United States.
See, again, take the reality of the question, since his father, as you well know, was from Africa, and his second father was from Indonesia, and he went to a madrasas in Indonesia. All not a big deal, but nevertheless, there are questions still surrounding that issue. Again, put it to rest with a bad joke. Now listen to clip 4.
Even after all this time, I still make rookie mistakes. Like I'm out in California, we're at a fundraiser, we're having a nice time. I happen to mention that Kamala Harris is the best-looking attorney general in the country. As you might imagine, I got trouble when I got back home. Who knew Eric Holder was so sensitive?
Okay, all in bad taste. So what question can I ask you? The answer is no question. I will say that there's a news article, record number of killers and rapists being released from upstate prisons, many returning to New York City, but that wouldn't relate to this story, would it? No, so we'll go back to this issue of the White House stenographers dinner. Do any of you have any comments about the performance that Obama put on before this disgraceful audience of sycophants? If you'd like to chime in, I'll do this for a few minutes. Get it off your chest. This is the Savage Nation. The phone number is 855-400-7282 from anywhere in the United States of America. 855-400-7282 to the last word in talk radio every day. 855-400-7282. There's another topic I'm going to get to today, which is Syria. The neocons of today, including Israel, pushing them, want Obama to take military action to topple Assad in Syria. I oppose it. I opposed it on Friday. I oppose it on Monday. I've never seen it happening again, but it's happening like a nightmare before my eyes. Do you think Obama should take military action to topple Assad in Syria? 855-400-7282. This is the Savage Nation. Let's go to the next soundbite. We go to the next clip, please.
And of course, the White House press corps is here. I know CNN has taken some knocks lately, but the fact is I admire their commitment to cover all sides of a story, just in case one of them happens to be accurate.
And triangulate the opposition.
My former advisors have switched over to the dark side. For example, David Axelrod now works for MSNBC, which is a nice change of pace since MSNBC used to work for David Axelrod.
Well, okay, fine. You know, even a stopwatch is right twice a day, so he was correct about that. Now, the reason they have street rats like Al Sharpton on MSNBC, a man who has no education, no experience, reads a teleprompter, is vile on every level. The reason he's on the air making millions a year is because isn't it cheaper to put a street agitator behind a microphone and a camera than, God forbid, he should be picketing outside General Electric with his rent-a-mob saying, David Immelt, how come you pay no taxes on $5 billion in General Electric income? So isn't it cheaper to pay a guy like him a few $1 million a year to keep him off the streets? I mean, think about it. It's a good business investment. You haven't heard from Jesse Hy Jackson, have you? I wonder what he's knocking down today. So this is an interesting thing, the White House stenographer's dinner. 855-400-7282 is the phone number. Let's go to clip 6.
Did you know that Sheldon Adelson spent $100 million of his own money last year on negative ads? You've got to really dislike me to spend that kind of money. I mean, that's Oprah money.
Okay, let's stop right there. To spend that kind of money. How much did George Soros spend to try and knock George Bush out of power, Obama? I mean, you want to be honest? You are hated by over 55% of the American people. That is just about the number of people who actually pay taxes. They despise you because they know that you're dismantling the country and basically robbing them. That's what you're doing. So let's start with clip 6 again. 855-400-7282 is the phone number. If you want to get into the Savage Nation, give it a shot.
Did you know that Sheldon Adelson spent $100 million of his own money last year on negative ads? You've got to really dislike me to spend that kind of money. I mean, that's Oprah money. You could buy an island and call it Nobama for that kind of money.
Now, who was it who created Nobama? Who was the first talk show host in America to coin the phrase Nobama? Why, it's Michael Savage, but you wouldn't know that. That's right, but it was Michael Savage. Finally now, you're not going to believe the last soundbite. This is the most vile, it's the most juvenile, it's the most insightful, and it's certainly not at the level of a president. This is something that a demagogue on the order of Huey Long would have used back in the 1950s. Listen to clip 7.
I am not giving up. In fact, I'm taking my charm offensive on the road. A Texas barbecue with Ted Cruz, Kentucky bluegrass concert with Rand Paul, and a book burning with Michelle Bachmann.
Shame on you if you have the capacity for shame.
Everybody loves Michelle. She's on the cover of Vogue, high poll numbers, but don't worry, I recently got my own magazine cover. Now, I get it. These days I look in the mirror and I have to admit, I'm not the strapping young Muslim socialist that I used to be.
How do you feel living in a country where a president is so in love with himself that he would revert to, I don't have words for it. Do you feel good knowing your president is basically a nightclub performer? Let's put it to you that way. Now, many of you will say, come on, cut him a break. He's just having a good time. Don't you think it's quite worrisome that there was no criticism at a roast? Normally, the White House Correspondents' Dinner is supposed to be a roast. No one roasted him. They're afraid of him. And I've said to you before that this is the most feared administration in modern American history. Every poll is now confirming what I've told you. Just as I told you there's a minimum of 33 million illegal aliens in the country, while they were telling you 11. Now, that was quoted last week. They got it from me. I'll tell you again. This is the most feared administration in history. Many of you will say, good, good, good. You right-wingers ought to be afraid of him. Well, you better look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself if you want to be afraid of your government. Is this what you worked for all your life? To have a government that accrues 2 billion bullets and acquires tanks for use on American streets, hollow point bullets, and by the way, your great Department of Homeland Security could not stop the Muslim bombers in Boston, could they? So what are those hollow point bullets for? So far as I know, DHS didn't fire a shot in Boston. So who are they getting ready to fire their shots at? Many people are asking that question. But Florida, David, you're on the Savage Nation.
Michael, they say Obama was funnier than Conan O'Brien, but as NBC found out, that doesn't really take very much.
Conan O'Brien is a very embarrassing human being. He's put in by the government media complex. He has no humor whatsoever. The lines are tepid. He has no cutting edge to him. He's nothing. He's a hack of the Stalinist regime.
Unfortunately, we don't pay our president to be a stand-up comic. We pay him to stand up to our enemies, which he's done precious little of.
That's very well put. That's right. No, he doesn't stand up to anyone except the American people who pay taxes. Those are his real enemy. Do you remember after the Boston bombing what Axelrod said? Do you remember what that man said? He said the president is of the opinion that it's a Tea Party member. Do you remember that?
Oh, boy. I'm glad I didn't hear that.
Oh, yes. They were asking him who they thought did it and why he didn't say anything about, in his first speech after the Boston bombing, they said, why didn't he mention a terrorist attack? He said, well, the president doesn't know, and he basically thinks it's probably some patriot. Oh, no, he said it's probably a patriot with a tax day revolt. Somebody with a tax day revolt. That's exactly what Axelrod said. That shows you the so-called mindset of the comedian-in-chief. Okay? And here we go to the callers. Hawaii, Mark, thanks for holding. You're on the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Dr. Savage. Obama's humor was a play right out of Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals. Alinsky wrote, quote, humor is essential, for through humor much is accepted that would have been rejected if...
But I did a whole chapter on Alinsky. Didn't you hear it earlier when I read it from Trickle Down Tyranny?
Yes, I read your book.
All right, all right. I'm glad you read it. I'm glad you're quoting it because you're right. That's right. What you do is you disarm the enemy by stating the obvious truth and turning it into a joke, such as, I'm not the strapping young Muslim socialist I used to be. Robert De Niro! Harvey Weinstein! Steven Spielberg!
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.